Hey, Nick Hodges here. I'm an old software developer from way back, as you can tell by this lovely grizzled visage here. Windows developer, coded a lot in Delphi. And I'm here today to talk about Aptible. An old timer like me takes a look at these newfangled toys that everybody has and is amazed because I can harken back to the days when deploying something like Aptible would have involved buying huge racks and big rooms with the stacked up computers, blades sitting in there and managing those things, trying to keep the room cool because the air conditioning broke down, all that kind of stuff. Aptible makes all of that go away. You don't have to worry about any kind of physical infrastructure because Aptible provides you platform as a service, infrastructure on demand in many, many powerful ways. First of all, as you'll see in our demo, you have a very easy user interface for managing everything you need. Second of all, the whole thing is done in containers. Your application is deployed via container, so there's no more of this, hey, it works on my machine or it works on that server, but it doesn't work on that server, trying to keep everything configured and up to date and all that stuff. Aptible has all of that covered for you. In addition, security is built right in. Aptible is very HIPAA friendly. It's safe for banks. For anybody who has any kind of sensitive data, the security is built right in. We won't be looking at the security side of things in our demo, real quick demo here today, but rest assured the security is completely covered for you. And finally, scalability. If you were running your own data center, your own server farm inside of your building, you had to worry about scalability. If things started building up, you had to go out, build and configure all your own servers. Well, no more. Now with a couple of clicks, you can scale automatically as your application grows and your company grows. So we're going to take a quick look at how an application works inside of Aptible, and we'll get started right now. Okay, so the first thing we'll look at here in Aptible is the concept of stacks. So stacks are basically just regions for where environments reside. You can think of them as just data centers or physical locations, but they're not really that. They're more conceptually a notion of a place where environments can reside. Most folks are going to end up using just the default locations, but you can actually create your own dedicated stack if you wish to. We're not going to do that today, but there is a cost involved, of course, but you can do that if you need to. For instance, if you have some sensitive data, financial data, PHI, things like that that need to be especially protected and sequestered off from other environments. So from here, I'm going to create an environment. An environment is merely a way to logically group resources together easily, generally within the same stack, but you can actually cross stacks if you need to using network integration. So I'm going to give this a simple name, just Aptible Demo here, and create the environment. And that's it. There's our environment, ready to go. Now I'm going to click there, and you can see it. Ready to go, ready to work. Next up, we'll create an app. Well, actually, I'm not going to create an app right now in front of you. I've already got an application. Anybody who knows anything about music knows that everybody collects their music on CDs, right? At least I did. But I always wanted a way to keep track of my CDs, but now we have computers for that. And I wrote a little CD collection application. And it's just a Mongo-based backend with an Express application running on Node.js. Very simple stuff. And it has a bunch of endpoints here where you can view CDs, you can post to the CDs, you can get the CDs, you can get a specific CD by ID, you know, standard stuff. You've seen all this before. Here's the model for our collection and all that stuff. It's very simple, very straightforward, and it runs just fine. And we're going to plug it into Aptible. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go back to our environment and create new app. We're going to call it CD collection, like so. We're going to create it inside the Aptible demo environment, and we'll click create app. And that's really great. Now, it's going to want our credentials again, so I will do that using my good trusty 1Password, and then do my two-factor authentication. And there we go. Now, what they want me to do is they want me to add an SSH key here, because what happens is your application will be hosted in a Git repository, probably GitHub. It works where we're going to be using GitHub. And we want to be able to push to the GitHub repository, causing a deployment to your application on Aptible. And of course, you don't want people to be able to do that willy-nilly, so you need an SSH key to ensure that you are who you say you are and that you are allowed to push code into that repository and then in turn have that code be pushed to Aptible's remote repository, which will then in turn build and run your application for you. So I have my public SSH key on my clipboard, so I'll just paste it in here right now. Now, I just want to make sure that you don't publish or push your private SSH key here. It's kind of easy to do, well, theoretically anyway, but just make sure you're pushing your public key. So I'll do that. I save my key, and now I want to have my own custom code to run the application that I showed you a minute ago. And what I need to do now is kind of set up my Git repository to do just that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do then, of course, is create a remote in my Git repository for Aptible. First thing I want to do here is to take a look and just see what remotes I have. I have just my normal origin remote here pointing to my GitHub repository. But what I want to do instead is I want to add a remote to point to Aptible. So I'm going to type git remote add, and I'm going to call that remote Aptible, and I'm going to point it to git at beta.aptible.com : and then my environment Aptible demo, spell it right, Aptible demo / cd collection.git. And so that's a repository now that points to the Aptible resource, the Aptible side of my Git application. And then of course from there I can go git push Aptible main : Aptible scan. And what that will do is that will take my code from GitHub and push it out to, whoops, wrong key. I, of course, protect my keys with a password. And what that's going to do is that's going to take my code off of GitHub and push it out to the Aptible server where it will be built and deployed. That'll take a few minutes, but we'll speed it up. So there you have it. Our app is now deployed. So a critical part of the application in deploying to Aptible is the inclusion of a Docker file. So Aptible is going to get your application, get the code. It's going to look for that Docker file. It's going to run that Docker file, obviously use it to create a container that runs your application inside of its environment. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You don't have to worry about setting up Docker. You don't have to worry about anything other than just providing that simple Docker file. And so we're going to expose it on, do things like expose it on port 3000. We know we're going to copy the data from the app directory into the container itself. We're going to run npm install, then we're going to run npm build, and then we're going to run this command to run the application itself. Very simple Docker container. And of course, your Docker files can be as complex as needed, and all should be well when you run it. Okay, so here we are back at Aptible. We're going to take a quick look at the application. So here's Aptible noting that you do have that Docker file, and you can actually see it there, which you'll notice it's the same one that we just looked at a minute ago. And we're going to create a new database. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose Mongo. That's the back end we're going to use. Just create a nice Mongo 4.0. My environmental variable in the application is called Mongo_URI. And there we go. We're going to keep that. We're going to the environmental variables will create it automatically for us here, and we're going to save and deploy that application. That application will be deployed here in a few minutes, and we'll speed that up, and it's all good, and we'll be back in a sec. And there it is, all deployed. Okay, and since we're going to deploy this publicly, just for the ease of use here, and being able to just poke around and look at it in the browser, we're going to create a nice endpoint here called just the command endpoint, which will be the /cds thing that you saw earlier. And boom, that was done. Now we actually should be able to go and take a look at our environment. And so now we have an environment there. We have the CD collection application. We have our endpoints that's being provisioned, and we'll wait for that. Okay, so that took a while. But now we have our up and running application. So I can copy this URL I can bring it up here and go here, and you'll get to the main basic endpoint, which says hello world. You look at the code, you'll see that's what it does. If we want to see what CDs are in the database, you'll notice that there aren't any, but you do get a nice blank little JSON file there. So let's go put some data inside the CD database. Okay, so we'll go back here to the application. We'll bring up this add cd.js file, paste in the new URL, and I'm going to put the ending on there, the endpoint address on there. And now I will run this, and you'll notice that we get the CDs added. And now if we go back to the browser and refresh the page, you'll notice that, hey, there's a bunch of CDs in there. If I grab one of these identifiers, put it on the end of the URL like that, you notice we'll get the single record back. So we got our application up, running, and working in less than 10 minutes. Piece of cake. Of course, it took a little more than 10 minutes to write the application, but you get the idea. And notice here, too, that all the infrastructure you need is all taken care of by Aptible. You don't have to do anything other than just go in the browser, use the application, and run it. Now, of course, the initial deployment isn't the last deployment. You're going to want to fix bugs. You're going to do all kinds of interesting things, add new features, whatever. So let's make a fix, make a change to our application. I'll say instead of hello world, I'm going to say hello Apple user, like so. And as of course we know, you can't have too many exclamation points in a hello user application. And so once you do that and save it, you're going to go over here, and I can actually take the application, deploy it, and say, you know, bug fix or whatever for my comment. I can commit it, and then at this point I can push it, right, like so, and now I have the changes out on GitHub. So now if I go git push the Aptible remote, the main branch to the Aptible remote, you'll notice that once again it will go out and deploy. I have to type in my super secret passphrase on my SSH key. And now it'll go out and deploy. Now the deploy is succeeded, and we can go over to the browser, go to the root of the application here again, and you'll see that our changes have been deployed. So that's as easy as pie. You check in and the deployment happens. It's awesome. Okay, so there we had it. In about 10 minutes or so, we deployed an application to the cloud, and with the push of a button, updated it. Piece of cake. Very, very easy to get things going with Aptible. I really like that. Another thing I really like is that you can deploy this application without having to spend any time at all worrying about the hardware or the infrastructure that this thing is deploying on. And of course, as my company grows, your company grows, Aptible will scale as big and as broadly as you need it to. You are in complete control of how your application deploys and scales. And in addition, your application is kept compliant, it's kept secure, and all the enterprise best practices for deploying applications are all taken care of for you without you concerning yourself with any of it. All you worry about is building and deploying a world-class application, and Aptible takes care of the rest. That's it. Give it a try. I really enjoyed taking a look at it, especially for an old guy like me. Thanks.